Welcome back to EH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I made a video a long time ago talking about the crazy red enchantments that are available for us in the Commander format, and some that worked particularly well, and others that were just wacky and wild that I wasn't sure exactly how to use them. Everybody seemed to like that video, so I continued on doing all the other colors. I guess I did an entire cycle of those videos, and I thought I would do one more talking about the crazy multicolored enchantments that we could possibly be using in the Commander format. Where exactly are they going to get used? I don't know. These are just really interesting enchantments that are multicolored that you guys might be able to find a place for. Let's start out with Righteous War. 1 white and a black enchantment. White creatures you control have protection from black. Black creatures you control have protection from white. What a weird card. You know, obviously you're going to play this in a deck that's black and white, and you're going to give your white creatures protection from black and your black creatures protection from white, and likely your commander is going to be both black and white. I suppose you could play this in a 3 or 4 or 5 color deck, but if we're just playing this in an Orzhov deck, my commander's black and white, so my commander is going to get protection from black and white, and actually that's not bad. Obviously, if you want to be targeting your own stuff, because of course you can't do that if your creatures have protection. Again, I just talked about this in my protection video, going over what exactly this does. It is going to make your creatures harder to target. It is going to make your creatures harder to block. Those are the big ones. White and black for me have the best targeted removal in the format, so that's a big one here, right? If I had to pick 2 colors to give my creatures protection from, white and black would probably be it. Those are pretty good colors to have protection from, so if I'm putting this in my deck just to give my creatures protection from black and or white, that's actually not bad, right? This actually could fit in some decks if you don't plan on targeting your own creatures. Next up, Breast Stealer's Crypt. 2 blue and a black enchantment. If a player would draw a card, instead they draw a card and reveal it. If it's a creature card, that player discards it unless they pay 3 life. So I have talked about this card before on my 10 card series, and it is a really powerful effect. It's weird, and it is kind of difficult to find a place where this can specifically fit. It's a powerful effect in that if a player would draw a card, it is a replacement effect for every card draw that is going to be happening for you and for every player. The big thing here, of course, is they got to reveal it. Everyone is revealing every single card that they draw. That in itself can be pretty handy. The other interesting thing here, of course, is hating on creatures in a way where if it's a creature card, they got to pay 3 or discard it. So you can use this in a theme where maybe you don't have a lot of creatures and you're just going to hate on those creature heavy strategies. But where it can be extra good though is if you want creatures in your graveyard, right? This is a very easy way for you to sort of discard creatures into your graveyard. If you're in a reanimation type of strategy in Dimir colors, this is just, I reveal a creature card, chuck it into my graveyard because that is where I actually want it, right? So there's actually a really neat way to use the card there as well. It's a very interesting card for sure. Maybe you guys can find a place for it in some of your decks. Next up, we got Dovescape, a very infamous card and a card that has been used in a few different strategies in a few different formats. It is a very unique and a very powerful card for sure. 3 and 3 Azorius hybrid mana. So white and blue, so 3 and then 3 more colored mana. So 6 mana total, that's a lot, but you are getting a really powerful effect off of this. Of course, it's an enchantment. Whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, counter that spell. That player creates X 1/1 white and blue bird creature tokens with flying, where X is the spell's mana value. So I think there's a lot of people out there that of course know this card exists because of its really powerful effect. There is some combo potential here. Let me know if you're using this card. I know for sure there's going to be some people watching this video that are using this card in their decks. I'd love to know how you're using it. There's a couple of different ways that you can use this card. First of all, it's countering all the non-creature spells. So if I'm in a white-blue deck that is very creature heavy, it's not going to hurt me at all, right? That is a place that you can use it. This is just a card where you're hating on non-creature strategies. It can be really good in a deck where your spells can't be countered, right? I think this is a fantastic include in a Taigam deck. Taigam Ojutai Master says instant sorcery and dragon spells you control can't be countered by spells or abilities. Now, of course, the dragons don't matter because those are going to be creature spells, but your instants and sorceries won't be countered by the Dovescape Dovescape because, of course, your instants and sorceries can't be countered in that deck. That's an interesting include there. However, as much as you think you might be hosing your opponents here, you got to be careful. They're getting those bird tokens. Maybe you could play it in a bird tribal deck as well, because it's very easy to crank out those bird tokens, right? I just cast a Smothering Tithe. It gets countered, but I'm getting 4 bird tokens, which in a bird tribal deck can be pretty darn good, right? So I think a lot of people might also be using this for the situation where I actually want my spells to be countered so that I can then create a whole bunch of bird tokens as well. Very interesting card for sure. Let me know if you guys are using this in the comments below. Next up, Wellspring. 1 green and a white enchantment aura. Enchant land. When Wellspring enters the battlefield, gain control of enchanted land until end of turn. So already we have a very unique, weird card here where I'm casting this, I'm going to target an opponent's land and I'm going to gain control of it, but only until end of turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, untap enchanted land, you gain control of that land until end of turn. So this is just a really fun, interesting, sort of not really huggy, but I'm gonna steal your land, but I'm not gonna steal it permanently. I steal your land essentially on my turn, right? You have a Gaia's Cradle, I cast the Wellspring, put it on your Gaia's Cradle, so that yes, you get to use it, but I get to use it as well. This is an alternative to I wanna use my opponent's powerful land, right? Rather than just I ghost quarter that powerful land and get rid of it, maybe I want to use it as well. Maybe my opponent has a Gaia's Cradle and I can even take more advantage of it than they can. So I can cast a Wellspring and on my turn, I gain control of their Gaia's Cradle and then on my turn I get to use it and then they get it back on their turn. So in a way, it's a little bit of a huggy effect where I'm not really annoying my opponent because they still get to use that Gaia's Cradle as well. So interesting political situation there as well in a commander game. Really unique, interesting card. I wonder if anyone's actually using this. Next up, we got Elemental Augury. Blue, black, and a red. So a Grixis enchantment. Pay 3. Look at the top 3 cards of target player's library. Then put them back in any order. So this is doing the Sensei's Divining Top thing, which for that reason can make it very usable if you want to be looking at the top cards of your library and reshuffling them, right? Of course, Sensei's Divining Top is super handy and a lot of different strategies for that reason. This is 3 mana though, right? And 3 mana is a lot more than 1 mana. Being able to shuffle the top 3 cards for 1 mana is super good. 3 mana is kind of a lot. However, this also works on your opponents, which can be handy as well, right? You get to look at the top 3 cards of target player's library. Is there a reason you need to do so? I don't know where this card specifically fits. It's a pretty decent ability. You can use it on yourself or your opponents. Where does this fit though? I don't know. Again, Grixis colors, that makes it obviously a lot less usable in the commander format. Is there a deck where I repeatedly want to be shuffling the top cards of my library? Definitely there is those decks. Are there some decks where you want to be doing it to your opponents as well? Possibly. Where does this fit? It's certainly an interesting card. Next up, we got Aether Rift, 1 green and a red enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, discard a card at random. That's not great. I don't love random discard. However, if you discarded a creature card this way, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield unless any player pays 5 life. The discarded card at random isn't great because, of course, you want to discard a creature card. If you discard anything else, you're just discarding a card and getting nothing out of it. If you're in a situation where maybe you're in a discard theme where discarding just benefits you, right? I have a Surly Badgersaur in play, so it doesn't matter what I discard, I am getting a benefit off of it. It can be good. Not great, but it is still usable there. Maybe I'm in a lands deck where if I discard a land card, then I can play it from my graveyard. So again, not really a downside. Obviously, you want to do the creature part here though. And this is kind of a weird reanimation card in Gruul colors, which is what makes it very unique. I randomly discard a creature card. And of course, if you only have creatures in your hand, that's guaranteed to be happening. If I only have 1 card in my hand and it's a giant creature like a Vorinclex, I'm going to be discarding that card. Even if it's at random, I still only have 1 card. My Vorinclex goes into my graveyard and then I can put it directly into play. Of course, though, it is likely your opponents are going to pay the 5 life. It is kind of funny, though, that it's unless any player pays 5 life. So you're going to get your opponents sort of fighting over who has to pay the 5 life to keep your Vorinclex off the battlefield. It might be a better strategy to put this in a deck where you actually don't have those big scary creatures, right? If I just have a Sakura Tribe Elder, discard that into my graveyard, and then put it directly into play, are any of my opponents going to pay 5 life to keep my Sakura Tribe Elder off the table? I don't don't think so, right? So maybe the I cheat big creatures into play strategy isn't the best one here. Maybe this is good in a deck where you just have a whole lot of creatures in your deck and it's almost assured you're going to be discarding a creature card, but nothing really scary, just a decent utility creature that your opponents probably won't want to pay 5 life to keep it off the table. Again, because it's any player paying the 5 life, you can get to some really funny, interesting politics sort of situations. It's a unique card for sure. I'm wondering if anyone's playing this already in the Commander format. Next up, we got Winter's Night. Red, green, and a white world enchantment. And again, I've talked about world enchantments quite a bit on my channel. I have a video dedicated entirely to world enchantments. Of course, this one is included in there. This is actually the only multicolored world enchantment. Every other world enchantment is monocolored. This is also the only world enchantment that's dealing with snow permanents. So whenever a player taps a snow land for mana, that player adds 1 mana of any type that land produced. That land doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So this is such a weird, unique, interesting card. Obviously, like all world enchantments, it works on everybody at the table. So this can be, I guess, a mana boosting effect for you if you're playing snowlands. But of course, then your lands don't untap during your next untap step. So that's not great. It can also, in a way, hose your opponents if they're playing snowlands, because I guess they get the doubling effect, but then they don't untap during the next untap step. So because it's giving you the bonus, but also the downside, it's like, okay, well, where am I playing this? Am I playing it because I want the benefit, or am I playing it because I want to hurt my opponents? It's a really weird card there. It's also a weird card because it's 3 colors. It's also in the colors that I don't know if you necessarily want to be doing snow permanents with this. Where are you going to be playing this card? It is definitely a unique, interesting one. It's not super obvious where you want to use it, and it's also not a card that fits in a ton of decks, but it sure is interesting. Next up, another card that I have talked about on my channel before, Sulimans Legacy, red and a white enchantment. When Sulimans Legacy enters the battlefield, destroy all djinns and ifrits. They can't be regenerated. Whenever a djinn or ifrit enters the battlefield, destroy it. It can't be regenerated. So I will first just say there are 5 djinn commanders in the format that, of course, this is going to be really great against. And there are also 5 Ifrit commanders, interestingly enough, that this, of course, is going to be good against. This will destroy those commanders when it enters the battlefield, and if your opponent recasts their commander, it'll get destroyed again, right? Because when it enters the battlefield, you destroy it. So if you got somebody in your playgroup that has one of those commanders, it could be really good. However, I mentioned this specifically on my channel before because I think it is maybe the best card to hit on a changeling strategy, because of course, changeling is both djinn and ifrits, right? They're every creature type. So when this enters the battlefield, it will destroy all changelings, and any changeling entering the battlefield will get destroyed. So this is a really fantastic card there. It's very niche, I know, but again, if you have somebody in your playgroup that has that omni-tribal or changeling tribal type of deck, which there is a fair amount of people doing that now, this can be a great card there, where it comes into play, wipes out all those cards, and then they essentially can't be played again, or else they'll get destroyed. Pretty unique card. Next up, we got a really unique card here, Nature's Blessing, 2 green and a white enchantment. Pay a green and a white and discard a card. So already, whenever you see these enchantments, and they don't really do this anymore, they used to do it a lot, where you just had an enchantment that sat on the battlefield and didn't have any sort of global effect. It had an activated ability. You just did some activated ability in order for it to do something. Other than that, if you didn't activate it, it just sat there and did nothing. You don't really see that anymore, right? You don't really see enchantments that sit there and do absolutely nothing until you activate them. So already we're a little weird here in what we're doing. And it's also a discard card in Selesnya colors, which for that reason, I don't know if it fits necessarily in too many strategies, because discarding in those colors is not very common in the commander format. However, it does have a pretty interesting ability. You pay green and a white and discard a card to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, or that creature gains banding for strike or trample. So that's pretty interesting. The most interesting part about this, obviously, is that it is a way to give creatures banding. And I'm not going to go into banding and exactly how it works. It is actually a pretty good ability. It's one of those abilities that is sort of laughed at throughout the history of the game because it was sort of weird and the rules were really complicated. They have sort of sussed up the rules a little bit with banding, and it's actually pretty darn good. It's all upside, right, with banding. There's no downside at all to it. I mean, giving first strike trample, that's also pretty good. +1/+1 counters, that's great as well. Obviously, a lot of Selesnya decks are doing the +1/+1 counter theme where maybe you might want this. Discarding a card is kind of a high cost here, but for me, the banding is the big one here. This is a very unique card in that it is able to give banding to creatures, and maybe you have a commander that you might really want banding with. It is a possibility for sure. Look into the banding ability. You can go check out one of my 10 deck ideas video where I went into the whole banding idea and I describe it a little bit better. It actually might work with your commander. So if you are in Selesnya colors, this is a great way to give your commander banding if it could possibly work in that deck. And lastly today, one of the most interesting cards I've ever seen, both with its art and also with what it's doing, and a card that I've forever tried to figure out a great place to put it. Malignant Growth, 3 green and a blue enchantment. Has cumulative upkeep 1. And of course, as I say all the time about cumulative upkeep, again, another ability that has gotten a really bad name, but I play this, I don't have to pay the cumulative upkeep right away. I only wait till my next turn, and then I only got to pay 1, and then I got to pay 2, right? It's not that bad, I don't think. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a growth counter on Malignant Growth. So essentially you are going to be putting the growth counters on at the same time you put the age counters on. So that is how much mana you will be paying for it, right? They sort of both coincide. At the beginning of each opponent's draw step, that player draws an additional card for each growth counter on Malignant Growth. Then Malignant Growth deals damage to the player equal to the number of cards they drew this way. Now, this card isn't super great. It would be much, much better if they dealt damage to them equal to the number of cards they had in their hand. It's only dealing damage equal to the number of cards they draw this way. So I play this card. It does absolutely nothing until my following turn. And I know people are going to say, wow, a 5-mana card that doesn't impact the board right away. It certainly is. It isn't great, not by a long shot. On my next upkeep, I'm going to pay 1 for the cumulative upkeep, and I'm going to put a growth counter on it. And then it's also going to not do anything until my first opponent's draw step. They're going to draw an additional card, which of course is not usually great in a commander game unless you want them to be doing that, right? The Nekusar decks, where I want to be having my opponent draw extra cards, might be a good fit for this, but obviously it's not in the right colors, right? So of course it's not going to fit there. Xyrus, however, is in the colors that this is fitting, so maybe there. I don't know if anyone's using this in their Xyrus decks. Obviously it's slow. There's a lot better ways like the wheel effects that can be having your opponent draw a whole bunch of cards all at once. This is an interesting way. It's also damaging your opponents, right? On the following turn, I pay another mana. It gets another growth counter. Now they're going to be drawing 2 cards and taking 2 damage as well. So I'm sort of getting a double bonus here. If I want my opponents to be drawing cards, they're also taking the damage as well. So I'm getting the bonus of drawing the cards, which I want, assuming I'm playing that deck, and I'm getting the bonus of dealing them damage. It can also work maybe in that huggy theme where you want your opponents to be drawing cards. Maybe you want them to have a really big hand. And then again, I'm doing that sneaky damage, right? Fevered Visions is another card that sort of does that, where I'm letting my opponents draw, but I'm also dealing them the damage as well, right? So maybe a deck where that card fits, this card fits as well. Again, it's 5 mana, it's slow. It is just super, super interesting. And I would love if somebody let me know in the comments below that they were using this card in one of their decks. It is currently in 101 decks on EDH Rec, so obviously some people are using it. It is for sure a very interesting card, without a doubt. All of the cards on this list, very interesting, janky, weird, crazy, multicolored enchantments that might work in certain decks, might not. Again, this isn't necessarily I'm recommending these cards to play. This is just some really weird, janky, interesting enchantments that we could be playing in the Commander format if we chose to. If you are thinking of purchasing any of these cards that you might want to put in your decks, I do have a TCG Player link. Give it a click. It helps support the channel, but that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.